Good morning. It's Friday, January 28th, 2022. This is To My Liberal Friends, and I'm John Haddo. Yesterday, a judge in Pennsylvania issued a ruling that has some ramifications on future elections. What was at stake in this was a challenge to a court decision during last election allowing mail-in ballots without any restrictions. Some parties sued, and Commonwealth Court Judge Mary Hannah Leavitt agreed that the argument writing the law violates the 1830 amendment of the Pennsylvania State Constitution that says a person must vote in person on election day, and unless they meet certain criteria. Now, this is the kind of law that exists, and I spoke about earlier, in many states. In New York, you can request a mail-in ballot, or an absentee ballot, if you will, but you have to state the reasons, and they're very limited. This has been traditional in states, but with the COVID, we expanded how you're going to vote. We allowed people to vote by mail because of the pandemic. But the problem is the courts were changing the rules on this during the election on the fly. Now, the judge did say that she believes that there is a way around this problem, and it's simply if presented to the people, and I'm quoting her, a constitutional amendment to end the Article 7, Section 1 requirement of in-person voting, it's likely to be adopted. But a constitutional amendment must be presented to the people and adopted into our fundamental law before legislation authorizing no-excuse mail-in voting can be placed on our statute books, end quote. She's absolutely correct. The state constitution overtakes any legislative or court-ordered rule on mail-in ballot. And this could become a problematic case in other states where they've adopted mail-in balloting without looking at what their state constitution actually requires. Now, I've said in the past that one of the problems with mail-in balloting is that there is a perception. I'm not saying it's reality, but there is a perception where there is something funny going on. There is some kind of fraudulent voting going on. And in life, perception becomes reality. If enough people believe something untoward is happening, then it causes doubt on the electoral process. For that reason, I have encouraged stricter voting requirements. I've also said I've actually read the Georgia and Texas new laws, and it's funny to say that they restrict voting when in fact they expand voting. And President Biden went down to Atlanta, gave that famous speech where he compared the laws in Georgia, the new ones, to Jim Crow 2.0. And yet any statistic shows that in the last election, African American voting increases exceeded those of white voters. It brought out more voters, and it didn't restrict them in any way. And the new law, even in Georgia, expands the number of early days for voting, expands the reasons you can and how you can request a mail-in ballot. It does require some form of voter ID, and for that, Democrats object. But in my opinion, we need to have some kind of check just to restore confidence in the election. I'm not saying there was massive voter fraud. I believe Biden won the election. He won it fair and square. But I do want to remove any perception that there is some kind of voter fraud going on out there. We can get this done, and I guarantee you it will happen. But Democrats are now going to challenge this court, and it will end up going to the state Supreme Court. But if they interpret the state constitution correctly, they will uphold the lower court. And, of course, Republicans lauded the ruling. They said that no excuse mail-in voting violates the state constitution, and therefore it shouldn't be allowed. We'll see. I suspect you'll get an amendment brought to the people, and it will probably pass. But you have to do that. You can't just say, oh, we don't like that law, so we're going to ignore it. We have to comply with the law. And I think other states are going to look at their laws very closely. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.